The rhythmic pulse of the lighthouse beam cut through the dense, saline fog, a solitary sentinel against the crashing waves of the North Atlantic. It was a sound Ethan Vance, 38, had lived by for 7 years, a constant, comforting thrum against the vast, indifferent silence of the sea. Inside the weathered stone dwelling that clung to the cliff face, the air was thick with the scent of brewing coffee and the subtle, lingering trace of salt and damp stone. Ethan, his broad shoulders slightly stooped, his hands calloused from years of maintaining the behemoth lamp, traced the faded photograph on the mantelpiece. Sarah, his late wife, smiled from the worn frame, her eyes holding the same endless blue as the unforgiving sea outside. A shadow, heavy and familiar, clung to his heart. In the small, sun-drenched, when the sun chose to break through, living area, Luna, 7, hummed a tuneless lullaby to a cluster of iridescent seashells meticulously arranged on a driftwood shelf. She was a child of the sea, with hair the color of wet sand and eyes that reflected the ever-changing sky. She knew nothing of the deeper shadows in her father's heart, only the quiet, unwavering love that enveloped her. Their isolated world, a fragile ecosystem of grief and quiet love, was about to be shattered, not by the rising tide, but by the relentless march of progress, embodied by a woman who saw only numbers where Ethan saw a soul. Ethan moved with the practiced efficiency of a man whose life was dictated by routine and responsibility. He checked the pressure gauges on the old lamp, its enormous Fresnel lens casting distorted refractions across the metalwork. The fog was thick today, a hungry beast swallowing the horizon, and the beam felt all the more vital. Downstairs, the smell of pancakes was almost ready. He flipped the golden discs onto a plate, adding a generous dollop of wild berry jam, Luna's favorite. "Time to rise and shine. Sunshine," he called, his voice a low rumble that always softened for his daughter. Luna appeared, her sandy hair still slightly disheveled from sleep, clutching a smooth, gray pebble in her hand. "Daddy, I dreamed the mermaids invited me to their castle today. It's made of coral and glowworms. Do you think they'd let you visit too? If you promise not to scare their fish?" Her eyes, wide and earnest, sought his. Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine curve of his lips that softened the weathered lines around his eyes. "I think they'd make an exception for an old sea dog like me. But only if you promise to tell me all about it." He placed a stack of pancakes in front of her. "Eat up, mermaid. We've got a big day." As Luna devoured her breakfast, her imagination painting vibrant underwater tapestries, Ethan's gaze drifted to the window. The fog was denser now, a suffocating blanket. He saw it before he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible struggle near the treacherous, jagged rocks, known as the Serpent's Teeth. A small fishing trawler, its engine sputtering, was fighting a losing battle against the strong, deceitful currents that swirled around the jagged coastline. Instinct, honed by years of living with the sea's capricious nature, flared within him. He snatched the binoculars from their hook by the window, adjusting the focus. The trawler was in trouble, dangerously close to the rocks. Its radio crackled to life, a faint, desperate voice calling for assistance. Ethan didn't need to hear the call sign. He knew every vessel in these waters, every fishing crew by their voice. He grabbed the old maritime radio, flicking it to the right frequency. "Fisherman's Pride, Fisherman's Pride. This is Keeper Vance at Point Lookout. Do you read?" A burst of static, then a relief-filled voice, gruff and anxious. "Vance. Thank God. Engines dying. Currents got us. We're drifting right towards the teeth." Ethan's voice was calm, authoritative, cutting through the fear. "I see you. Don't fight the current. You'll tear her hull. Let it take you, just for a moment. Then, when I say full reverse starboard, hard to port. He could almost feel the currents himself, charting an invisible path in his mind's eye, a path that only someone with a lifetime immersed in this coast could perceive. Now, full reverse starboard, hard to port. He watched through the binoculars, his breath fogging the lenses, as the small boat, following his precise instructions, narrowly scraped past the deadliest of the rocks, its bow turning just enough to catch a gentler outward current. The engine coughed, then roared back to life, sputtering but pulling away from danger. "Vance, you saved our bacon again." The fisherman's voice boomed over the radio, laced with profound relief. "How in hell do you see through this fog?" "We owe you." Ethan simply grunted, a tight smile on his face. "Just keep an eye on your charts next time, Billy, and keep that engine tuned." He flicked the radio off, the rhythmic pulse of the lighthouse lamp, a counterpoint to the thrumming in his chest. "The sea takes, Luna," he murmured, more to himself than to his daughter, still engrossed in her pancake castle. "But it also gives. It always balances." He knew the cold grip of memory, of Sarah's last dive, the crushing weight of the deep, a wound that never truly healed. But he also knew the fierce satisfaction of duty, of protecting, of keeping the light on. He was defined by duty and grief, his connection to the sea, a double-edged sword, a source of pain, but also his only livelihood and a way to protect. Luna was his anchor. Her innocence a beacon of hope he struggled to fully embrace. He was still sipping his cooled coffee when the low hum of an approaching engine, far more powerful than any local vehicle, reached him. It was an alien sound on their isolated bluff, a discordant note in the symphony of wind and waves. He saw it before it parked. A sleek, dark gray government issued SUV, gleaming like a polished shark, incongruous against the ancient stone of the lighthouse. A woman emerged, tall and elegant, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense ponytail. Dr. Aris Thorne, 36, was a striking figure, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit that seemed to repel the damp sea air. She was followed by a nervous-looking assistant, laden with a tablet and a briefcase. Aris walked with a determined stride, her high heels clicking sharply on the gravel path. Ethan met her at the door, his posture defensive, his eyes narrowed. He took in her expensive attire, her air of cool competence, and a familiar sense of unease settled over him. People like her didn't visit unless they wanted something, and what they usually wanted was to change everything. Aris wasted no time on pleasantries. Her green eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over him, the lighthouse, and even Luna, who had retreated slightly behind Ethan's leg, clutching her pebble like a talisman. "Mr. Vance, I presume?" Her voice was crisp, efficient, devoid of any warmth. "Dr. Aris Thorne, Department of Coastal Development. I believe you received our preliminary communications." Ethan merely grunted. They went straight into the recycling bin. Aris's lips thinned almost imperceptibly. "Unfortunate. It would have saved us both time. To reiterate, Mr. Vance, your role as lighthouse keeper, and indeed this entire facility, is obsolete. The light is automated, the foghorn digital. This site represents untapped economic potential, a prime location for the proposed Ocean's Edge, data processing hub, and luxury eco-tourism destination." She gestured vaguely towards the sea, her hand making a sweeping motion as if envisioning shimmering glass and steel where Ethan saw only raw, untamed nature. Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. "Obsolete? This isn't just a site, Dr. Thorne. It's a home, and a warning beacon that saved lives for a century. Just this morning, I guided Billy's trawler clear of the serpent's teeth. Your automated light wouldn't have spotted them in that fog, let alone guided them." Aris blinked, A flicker of something that might have been surprise in her eyes, quickly masked. An admirable, if anachronistic act, Mr. Vance. However, we have detailed studies. The average number of vessel incidents in this sector has decreased by 97% since automated GPS systems became standard. Your contribution, while perhaps personally gratifying, is statistically negligible. Statistically negligible? Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. Tell that to Billy. Tell that to the families whose fathers I brought home. He felt a deep, primal threat to his sanctuary, his daughter's future, and the very memory of Sarah, who had loved this place as much as he did. Luna, sensing the escalating tension, whimpered softly, pressing closer to Ethan. Aris glanced at the child. A brief moment of uncomfortable silence, before she returned her gaze to Ethan, her expression firm. Mr. Vance. Emotion has no place in infrastructure development. We have economic projections, environmental impact assessments, and a clear mandate from the state. We're offering you a generous severance package and relocation assistance. She pushed a sleek tablet towards him, displaying a dizzying array of numbers and architectural renderings that bore no resemblance to the venerable lighthouse. Your decision is due in 3 weeks. Ethan didn't touch the tablet. His eyes, the color of the storm-gray sea, met hers with an unwavering intensity. My decision, Dr. Thorne, is already made. This lighthouse stays. And so do we. Aris's lips thinned again, a hint of annoyance in her carefully controlled demeanor. We'll see about that, Mr. Vance. She turned abruptly, her assistant scrambling to keep up, and retreated to her gleaming vehicle. The hum of its powerful engine seemed to mock Ethan's quiet defiance as it sped away, leaving him alone once more with the wind, the waves, and the unsettling certainty that his peaceful, grieving world was about to be invaded. Over the next few days, their isolated world was indeed invaded. Aris Thorne and her technical teams descended upon the lighthouse like a swarm of highly organized, efficient locusts. Drones buzzed overhead, their cameras mapping every angle of the ancient structure. Surveyors in bright vests moved with clipboards and laser levels, their presence an irritating, persistent hum in Ethan's carefully constructed routine. Luna, initially curious about the strange machines, soon grew wary. The robot lady and her silent, focused workers disrupted their morning walks, their afternoon shell, collecting even their quiet evenings, the beam of the lighthouse no longer feeling like their private secret. Ethan watched them, a simmering frustration beneath his stoic exterior. He couldn't openly confront them all, but he could make their lives a little less efficient. A misplaced toolbox here, a lost set of schematics there, an intricate explanation of the local microclimates that subtly contradicted their computer models. He was a silent saboteur, a ghost in his own home. He gave misleading local information about tides and currents, subtle enough that it wouldn't be outright defiance, but just enough to throw their precise calculations off. He found a certain grim satisfaction in watching Aris's brow furrow with mild irritation as her team reported small, inexplicable delays. Mr. Vance, your obstructionist behavior is costing time and resources. Aris snapped one afternoon, finding Ethan calmly polishing the brass fixtures in the lantern room while her team struggled to get a precise reading from a particularly finicky sensor. Ethan met her gaze, his expression neutral. And your ambition, Dr. Thorne, is costing this place its soul. The lighthouse isn't a data server, it's a living entity. It doesn't like strangers with fancy gadgets. He motioned towards a drone that was having trouble stabilizing in an unpredictable downdraft. Aris scoffed, but a flicker of frustration crossed her face. Her world was built on logic and predictability, and Ethan Vance, with his quiet competence and his deep intuitive knowledge of this wild place, was proving to be infuriatingly unpredictable. The conflict escalated dramatically when Aris, in her systematic survey, decided that one of Sarah's old maritime charts, a beautifully rendered, hand-drawn map of the local currents and known shipwrecks, was simply an outdated decoration. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the aged parchment. "This chart is completely inaccurate by modern GPS standards," she stated, her voice brisk. "It's obscuring a prime spot for our new interactive display." Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. His eyes, usually guarded, blazed with a fierce, protective fire. "Don't touch that." The command was low, guttural, a warning more primal than anything Aris had ever heard in a boardroom. Aris flinched, startled by the raw emotion. "Mr. Vance, it's just a map. We can scan it. Preserve it digitally." Before she could finish, Luna, who had been quietly playing with her shells on the floor nearby, suddenly sprang up. Her small hands pushed Aris's away from the chart with surprising force. "Don't touch Mommy's map," she cried, her voice trembling, tears welling in her big blue eyes. "Daddy draws mermaids on it for me." The words hung in the air, piercing the professional armor Aris wore so effortlessly. She looked from the child's tear-streaked face to Ethan's rigid, furious expression, and then back to the faded map. A pang, sharp and unexpected, twisted in her chest. She had never been yelled at by a child before. Never had her logical reasoning so completely undermined by raw, unadulterated grief and protectiveness. Emotion, she knew, was a weakness, but seeing it so pure, so fierce, in this small girl and her stoic father, was disorienting. A faint blush crept up her neck. She felt a flicker of something she didn't recognize. Guilt stir within her. She viewed emotion as a weakness. Yet, this direct, innocent defense of memory by a child began to chip away at her carefully constructed defenses. Ethan's resistance stemmed from deep personal history and a primal need to protect the last vestiges of his past and his daughter's peace. Later that evening, the golden light of sunset finally managed to break through the persistent coastal haze, painting the lighthouse living area in warm amber tones. Aris, surprisingly, was still there. One of her drones, a sleek, expensive piece of equipment, had gotten tangled in the complex rigging of the lighthouse's lightning rod system. Her technical team, already exasperated by Ethan's subtle obstructions, had given up for the day, citing unforeseen atmospheric interference. Aris stood below, a frustrated frown marring her perfect features, making increasingly impatient calls on her satellite phone. Ethan watched her from the lantern room, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. Then, with a sigh that indicated his deep-seated duty overriding his current animosity, he descended. "You'll never get it down like that," he stated, his voice calm amidst her heated, one-sided conversation. "The wind currents up there are tricky. You need to know how the salt and damp affect the metal tension." Aris broke off her call, glaring. "And I suppose you're an expert on drone retrieval, Mr. Vance." Ethan merely raised an eyebrow, then, without waiting for an answer, began to scale the external ladder, moving with a surprising agility that belied his earlier weariness. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with a practiced ease, untangling the delicate rotors from the thick, corroded wire. He spoke softly, almost to himself, explaining how to work times with times the wind, not against it, how the sea air made everything stick and bind. Within minutes, the drone, slightly battered but mostly intact, was safely in his hands. He handed it to her, his gaze unwavering. "Your team should be more familiar with the environment they're surveying." Aris took the drone, a flicker of grudging respect in her eyes. "Thank you." It was a rare admission from her. She watched him descend, his powerful frame moving with a quiet surety that she found unsettlingly attractive. That night, as the last vestiges of twilight faded, plunging the coast into a deep, star-dusted velvet. Aris found herself still lingering. She had promised herself she would leave, review the day's data in her hotel room, but something held her back. Perhaps it was the unsettling feeling of defeat, or perhaps it was the magnetic pull of the small, warm light spilling from the lighthouse windows. She saw Ethan then, sitting on the stoop, Luna nestled in his lap. He was pointing up, tracing invisible lines in the vast expanse of the night sky. Luna's face was rapt, her small finger mirroring his as he guided her gaze. "That's Cassiopeia, sunshine," Ethan murmured, his voice softer than Aris had ever heard it. "She's a queen, sitting on her throne. And over there, that bright one, that's the North Star. It always guides you home, no matter how lost you get." Luna giggled, snuggling deeper into her father's embrace. "Like you guide the boats, Daddy?" "Something like that," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Each twist, each turn, it holds, like promises. And like a good knot, it won't let go when the storm hits." Aris watched, unseen, a knot tightening in her own chest. She had never seen such tenderness, such unadulterated love. Her own childhood had been a series of achievements. Her father, a brilliant but distant figure, who had measured his love in accolades and future prospects. She remembered the cold emptiness of her sprawling childhood home, the silence that was never truly peaceful. A pang of loneliness, sharp and sudden, pierced through her. Luna, seemingly sensing Aris's presence, or perhaps just eager to share her world, suddenly called out, "Dr. Thorne, Daddy's teaching me about the stars. Did you know my mommy loved the stars even more than Daddy loves the sea?" Aris stepped into the light, a forced smile on her face. "No, I didn't know that, Luna." Luna scrambled off Ethan's lap, running to Aris with an uninhibited openness that disarmed her. "Mommy said the stars were all the people who loved you, shining down from heaven, and Daddy used to find sunken treasures for her. He was the bravest diver ever." But then he got sad. The innocent words, delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty, hit Aris like a physical blow. She looked at Ethan, who had frozen, his gaze fixed on the distant sea, his profile etched in pain. He had been a deep-sea diver, a treasure hunter. This quiet, grieving lighthouse keeper had a life, a past, far more complex than she could have imagined. Her emotional walls began to crack, stirred by Luna's innocence and Ethan's unexpected tenderness, revealing a vulnerability that shocked her. She'd never seen a father-daughter bond so raw and authentic. Ethan remained wary, but a faint shift in his perception of Aris began. The next morning broke with an unsettling stillness, the air heavy and oppressive. The usual roar of the waves was muted, replaced by a low, insistent moan of the wind, building slowly from the north. Ethan spent the morning glued to the weather station, the radio crackling with increasingly dire reports. News anchors spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Meteorologists used words like unprecedented, Category 5, and Superstorm. It was heading directly for their stretch of the coast, expected to make landfall by morning. "This is not a drill," a solemn voice declared over the radio. "Mandatory evacuation orders are now in effect for all coastal residents. Seek higher ground immediately. Repeat. Evacuate immediately." Aris's team, visibly shaken, began packing their gear with frantic haste. Drones were stowed, sensors dismantled, vehicles loaded. Her assistant, pale and trembling, approached Aris. "Dr. Thorne, we need to leave. The last evacuation window is closing." Aris stood, her tablet clutched in her hand, staring out at the churning dark gray sea. The sky was an ominous bruise, the horizon swallowed by a wall of turbulent clouds. She looked at Ethan, who was already moving with a grim determination, battening down hatches, securing anything that wasn't bolted down, preparing the lighthouse for a siege. His movements were efficient, practiced. A man preparing for battle. "Mr. Vance," Aris said, her voice tight with an unfamiliar anxiety. "You must evacuate. It's too dangerous to stay. There won't be another chance." Ethan didn't stop his work. He merely glanced at her, his eyes cold and resolved. "Someone has to keep the light on. It's my duty, always." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Asterisk. Someone has to protect this place. This memory. This last piece of Sarah. Asterisk. Aris watched her team drive away, their headlights swallowed almost immediately by the gathering gloom. She was alone, save for Ethan and Luna, in the face of an impending catastrophe. Her scientific mind screamed at her to leave, to seek safety, to follow the logical course of action. But the image of Luna's innocent trust, Ethan's lonely defiance, had stopped her cold. She reversed her car, battling the intensifying storm, the powerful engine groaning as she fought her way back up the treacherous, winding road. She stepped back into the lighthouse, dripping wet, her expensive suit plastered to her body. She shivered, not just from the cold. I can't leave you too," she said, her voice barely audible above the howling wind, tinged with a raw vulnerability Ethan had never witnessed. "My project might be numbers, but you're not. You're people, and that little girl," she trailed off, a tear escaping the corner of her eye, quickly wiped away. Ethan looked at her. Truly looked at her. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes, the fear, the determination. For a moment, his usual guardedness, his lingering resentment, wavered. He was not used to anyone staying. Not when the storms hit. A shock of warmth, gratitude, and a sliver of relief, foreign and unsettling, bloomed in his chest. "You're staying?" he asked, his voice rough with surprise. Aris nodded, squaring her shoulders. "I'm staying. Someone has to make sure Mr. Vance doesn't try to fix a collapsing lighthouse on his own. I've seen your methods." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, quickly gone. The immense pressure of protecting Luna alone remained heavy. But now, facing the monster outside, Ethan felt a flicker of acceptance towards this unexpected ally. Aris, terrified, but driven by a nascent, unfamiliar empathy, had finally pushed past her logical self-preservation. The Superstorm, aptly named Leviathan, hit with a primeval roar. Waves, monstrous and green-black, crashed against the base of the lighthouse, sending plumes of spray hurtling hundreds of feet into the air. The old stone edifice groaned, a living thing battling for its existence. Inside, the roar was deafening, the entire structure vibrating with the immense, untamed power of the North Atlantic. Ethan, his jaw set, moved to check the primary lamp. With a gut-wrenching shudder, the light flickered, pulsed erratically, then died, plunging the lantern room into terrifying darkness, save for the frantic flashes of lightning. He cursed under his breath, wrenching open the control panel. Main power conduits fried. He yelled over the cacophony. Emergency generator should kick in. He flipped a series of switches, his face illuminated briefly by another flash of lightning. Nothing. The darkness remained absolute, pierced only by the storm's furious light. "It's dead," he stated, his voice tight. "The generator's dead. Water must have breached the intake." His mind, usually so clear in crisis, felt a chilling echo of another storm. Another failure. Sarah. The rogue wave. The shattered console. His hands trembled. Not from cold, but from memory. Aris, despite her fear, remained surprisingly calm. Her scientific mind, accustomed to problem-solving, kicked in. She pointed to a hairline crack on the old blueprint, now clearly visible. The original plans show a counterweight system for the auxiliary lamp, but the structure near the base of the main shaft, it's compromised. It's widening, she cried, pointing to the crack that was visibly expanding with each shutter of the lighthouse. His own past trauma resurfaced, a cold dread seizing him, a paralyzing fear that he would fail again, lose everything again. But then, from downstairs, a small, terrified cry. Luna! The sound snapped him back to the present. He would not fail Luna. He would not. He pushed the memories down. Deep. Down. Sarah. I swore I wouldn't lose anyone else to this sea, he muttered, more to himself than Aris, the raw pain a fleeting flicker in his eyes. He looked at Aris, seeing her unexpected competence, her sharp mind already assessing the new threat. He nodded. A silent acknowledgement of her insight. They were in this together. Okay, Ethan said, his voice firm, pushing the panic away. We rig the counterweight. You know the structure. I'll get us up there. But first, we secure Luna. They descended carefully, the wind howling through every crack, the old stairs creaking and groaning beneath their feet. Luna, wide-eyed and terrified, was huddled in the small, makeshift bunker Ethan had prepared in the stoutest part of the dwelling. She clung to her stuffed narwhal, her small body trembling with every deafening crash of a wave. "Daddy!" she cried, rushing into his arms. "I'm here, sunshine. And Aris is here too," he reassured her, pulling her close. "We're just going to light the little lamp, the one your great-grandfather used. It'll be a bit of an adventure." He tried to inject a cheerfulness he didn't feel. Stroking her hair, Aris knelt, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm here too, Luna. Your daddy knows this lighthouse better than anyone. We'll make sure the light stays on." He showed her the emergency kit, the flashlights, the thermal blankets. "Stay here. Don't come out for anything. We'll be back as soon as the lamp is lit." Luna nodded, tears still in her eyes, but a flicker of resolve in their depths. She clutched her narwhal tighter, already in her mind, drawing a picture of her daddy and the robot lady as heroes, battling the storm, bringing back the light. It was a subtle, unconscious, visual reminder of the unique connection forming in the heart of the chaos. The climb was brutal. The internal structure of the lighthouse, meant to withstand centuries, was now a treacherous ascent. Parts of the spiral staircase had broken loose, sending splintered wood and chunks of stone cascading into the darkness below. They were forced to clamber over debris, navigate precarious ledges, the wind whipping through shattered windows, threatening to tear them from the very walls. "Hold that beam," Ethan yelled over the wind, pointing to a splintered support near the top of the shaft. Aris, surprisingly agile, despite her heels, which she'd kicked off in favor of bare feet, braced herself against the wall, using her body weight to stabilize the structure. "It's groaning. The stress fracture from the blueprints. It's widening," she cried, pointing to a hairline crack that was visibly expanding with each shutter of the lighthouse. Ethan, without hesitation, began to tie off a series of emergency ropes, securing the beam with improvised knots. "I can reach it from here," he shouted, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the lantern room, now a gaping maw of darkness above them. "It's just like working the sub's arm, just tighter." Aris stared, momentarily stunned. "You were a diver?" she yelled, disbelief and awe in her voice. "A deep-sea diver? Why didn't you say anything?" Some things you bury. For good reason. Now focus." He pulled a heavy wrench from his utility belt. The tool, a familiar extension of his hand. They reached the lantern room, battered and bruised, but the worst was yet to come. The auxiliary lamp, an ancient cast-iron contraption, was stuck, corroded by decades of disuse. Its winding mechanism refused to budge. Ethan grunted, pulling with all his strength, but it remained stubbornly seized. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. He felt the old panic rising, the sense of helplessness that had consumed him after Sarah. He closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Asterisk. Sarah. Not again. Not Luna. Aris, seeing the flicker of despair in his eyes, quickly assessed the situation. "The counterweight system is below this," she shouted, pointing to a series of rusty gears embedded in the floor. "The original design shows a leverage point, a specific sequence to free it." Her architectural mind, seeing patterns and mechanics, was working at full speed. Together, using her brain and his brawn, they began to manipulate the ancient system. Ethan's deep-sea diving experience, his years of wrestling with stubborn machinery, under immense pressure in confined, dangerous spaces, proved invaluable. He knew how metal fatigued, how leverage worked, how a delicate touch could sometimes achieve what brute force couldn't. He used the heavy wrench, tapping, twisting, applying precisely measured force to the ancient gears. The storm raged outside, throwing them against the walls, but they worked as one, their movements synchronized, a desperate, silent dance against chaos. With a final, agonizing groan, the mechanism gave way. The auxiliary lamp, small but sturdy, swung free. Ethan pulled the thick rope, winding the heavy weight that would power its rotation. As he finished, the lamp sputtered, then caught, casting a weak but steady beam out into the swirling maelstrom. It was a fragile beacon, but a beacon nonetheless. Ethan collapsed against the cold metal, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. His arm was bruised, but his eyes were fixed on the steady rhythm of the light cutting through the relentless storm. "The light. It's on," he whispered, a raw, emotional catch in his voice. "They'll make it." Through a small, unbroken window, Aris saw it. In the distance, a faint, familiar silhouette. Billy's trawler. They were still struggling, but the small, persistent beam of the auxiliary lamp, combined with Ethan's earlier radio guidance, was enough. They changed course, slowly, painstakingly, pulling away from the deadly rocks. Relief, overwhelming and profound, washed over Aris. "You did it, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion, kneeling beside him. Her hand, usually so precise and controlled, gently reached for his, her fingers intertwining with his calloused ones. "You saved them all. You saved this place." Her eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, were now soft, brimming with unshed tears. For the first time, she saw him not as an obstacle, but as a hero, a man of profound courage and silent sacrifice. His duty, his quiet acts of protection, these were not statistically negligible. They were everything. Aris, whose world had been built on numbers and logic, now understood that some things defied quantification. The storm, as if having expended its fury, slowly began to abate. The howling wind lessened to a mournful sigh. The crashing waves receded into a rhythmic roar. Dawn, a bruised gray, began to break, revealing a landscape scarred but not destroyed. Rescue teams, their boats navigating the still treacherous waters, arrived as the light of the auxiliary lamp still pulsed, a defiant heartbeat against the receding darkness. They found Ethan, bruised and exhausted, resting against the lamp housing. Aris, her face smudged with grease and streaked with tears, sat beside him, still holding his hand. Luna, safe and sound, was found coloring in her bunker, her drawings now including a brave robot lady with a hammer, fighting a monster wave. The fishermen rescued earlier, led by a deeply grateful Billy, rushed to the lighthouse, their faces etched with profound relief. They hailed Ethan as a hero, shaking his hand, patting his back, their voices thick with emotion. News crews, defying the lingering dangers, soon arrived, their cameras capturing the story of the old lighthouse keeper and the brilliant architect who had chosen to stay. Aris, standing before the cameras, no longer the crisp, detached professional, spoke with a conviction that silenced even the most cynical reporters. "This lighthouse isn't obsolete," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound passion. "It's a symbol, it's a beacon of what truly matters: community, protection, and the human spirit. My initial assessment was profoundly flawed. To convert this into a luxury resort would be to erase history, to silence a guardian, to ignore the very heart of this coast." She then unveiled a new proposal, hastily drafted but passionately presented: a non-profit foundation for the lighthouse's preservation, converting it into a heritage site and a cutting-edge coastal research and warning system. Her expertise, now guided by empathy, would be dedicated to protecting lives, not just generating profit. "And Mr. Vance," she added, her eyes meeting his, with his unparalleled knowledge of these waters, would be an invaluable lead consultant. He, more than anyone, understands what it means to keep the light on. Ethan, listening, felt a profound sense of vindication. His faith in the lighthouse, and in himself, was restored. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips, a smile that reached his eyes, chasing away some of the long-held shadows. "Dr. Thorne," he said, pushing himself up, his hand reaching for hers. "You're not so bad for a city slicker. You saved this light too." Aris laughed, a bright, clear sound that seemed to banish the last whispers of the storm. A tear escaped, quickly wiped away. "Call me Aris. And you, Mr. Vance," she paused, her gaze softening, "are the greatest architect I've ever met." Of safe passages. 6 months later, the lighthouse stood proudly against the backdrop of a crisp autumn sunset. Its light once again, a steady, comforting presence. It had been partially restored, a blend of ancient stone and subtle, modern technology. It was now a vibrant heritage site by day, drawing visitors who learned of its history and the story of the Great Storm. By night, it also served as a critical research center for Aris's successful new coastal monitoring system, a network of advanced sensors and predictive models that complemented, rather than replaced, the human element. Ethan, now a lead consultant for the foundation, worked closely with Aris, his deep local knowledge proving invaluable. In the cozy dwelling, the air was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken. Aris, dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, her hair occasionally falling from its ponytail, stirred a pot of simmering vegetables. She had learned simple domesticity, embracing the quiet rhythm of their life. Luna, her hair sun-kissed, proudly showed off a small, beautifully restored brass lamp, one of the original auxiliary lights from a forgotten storage room. "Daddy, Aris, look! My lamp is working. It can guide the way home." She beamed, her eyes shining. Ethan, watching Aris from across the kitchen, felt a profound peace settle within him. The crushing weight of grief had finally lifted, replaced by a lightness he hadn't known was possible. He saw Aris not just as the brilliant architect, but as the woman who had stayed, who had fought, who had healed a part of him he thought was permanently broken. He walked over to her, his hand finding her waist, pulling her gently close. "You know, this silence, it's not so lonely anymore. It's peaceful." Aris leaned her head on his shoulder, a profound sense of belonging washing over her. She had found something here, in this remote, rugged place, that all her corporate achievements could never provide. "Because it's not silence, Ethan," she murmured, her voice soft. "It's home. Our home." Luna, sensing the unspoken connection, ran up and hugged their legs. "Are you two going to get married like in my mermaid story?" she asked, her directness cutting through the quiet moment. Ethan laughed, a full, joyful sound that echoed through the small dwelling. He looked at Aris, his eyes filled with love and a promise for the future. "What do you say, Aris? Ready for another adventure?" Aris smiled, her eyes brimming with a happiness she had never imagined. "With you, Ethan Vance," she whispered. "Always." The lighthouse beam continued its rhythmic pulse, a steady, unwavering light against the deepening twilight. It was no longer just a warning beacon, but a symbol of hope, a testament to resilience, and a powerful, enduring light for a family forged in crisis and bound by an unconditional love that had risen from the ashes of grief. Ethan Vance had found his purpose, his redemption, and a love he thought forever lost, here at the edge of the world. And Luna had the complete, loving family she always deserved, their laughter now echoing with the sound of the sea, their future as bright and endless as the stars above.